What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Random Redshirt Podcast. I am Zach, one of the hosts, and the other host with me is Chris. How's it going, Chris?
It's going great, Zach. Hello, everyone around the world and the interwebs again. As always, Zach, great to be here to talk with you and to share what we love talking about with the rest of you. And thanks everyone for listening. We really appreciate it. It's so much fun for us, and this is a great journey.
Yeah, it is. And for those of you tuning in for the first time, welcome to our podcast. We are two nerdy guys who love all things nerdy, geeky, whatever you want to call it. This podcast, we talk a lot about science fiction with a little dabble of pop culture, but mostly science fiction. We talk about a lot of Star Trek, Star Wars, and everything in between. And we are currently in the process of doing our very first ever episode by episode review of anything. Normally, what we do, if you go back and watch previous episodes, is that we will typically review the first episode of a series that we're really excited about or enjoy, like Andor or Obi-Wan or name a series we've done in the past, Chris. And then at the end of the season, we'll come back and review the whole season. But with Star Trek Picard, which is what you're all here to watch and listen to, season 3 we felt was pretty special with the publication that this is going to be it with this crew. We felt like this was a good way to go out with the crew, is to go with them on the journey in this last season of Picard and watch and give you our reaction response as things happen episode by episode. We're a little bit late getting to this one. We had some technical difficulties the last time we attempted to record this, but that's okay. We got to figure it out now, and we are back trying to get this done, because as the time of this recording, the new episode 5 is out. So we will be sure to review that for you coming very soon. We'll try to get that done hopefully this weekend and get that out for you as soon as possible. But with that being said, Chris, let's jump into episode 4. We've covered a lot of stuff in these first 3 episodes of Picard. I mean, we've had Doug on with us, and we're only 3 episodes in. Yeah, man, what are your thoughts so far leading up to episode 4? Let's just kind of the first, third-ish of this season. What are some of your, overall thoughts going into episode 4?
You connected on it just a moment before, but what I thought was great was this season that we're getting in the first 3 episodes, right? We've got not only we have this really close connection to TNG and the TNG team and the TNG cast, and that's great. But then we also, recently got connected to DS9, which was fantastic. And
yes, it was.
and so I feel like, oh wow, it's great that it's connecting the universe together. And a little bit, if we remember what Doug was saying, I thought he had a great point. Doug felt that this season of Picard is connected to the same universe that TNG and DS9 was. He felt that some other series were like in a different universe, or other seasons were perhaps different universe. So I thought, that was a great point. So I can totally feel that, and I really appreciate that there's the connection there, because you've got, in DS9 there were some really pivotal points and some major kind of factions introduced in DS9, and you kind of wonder what happened, what happened to them. And so
yeah, the fallout from the Dominion War.
Right.
Yep.
Right. It was a huge thing. And
yeah,
but I don't think we heard anything after DS9 about the Dominion Wars, really, not too much. So this is great that I think we're coming back and seeing this. So episode 4, we both watched it, and we had some really strong reactions of it. And I thought, we're going to talk about it, but I think we both felt overwhelmingly positive about episode 4. And the title of episode 4, no win scenario, right? So I got this week. I've got you got it too?
Me too.
Yeah.
We got our 40th anniversary Star Trek shop exclusive Khan Funko Pops from the Wrath of Khan. For those of you who are listening and not watching on YouTube, we have our Funkos in hand. We pre-ordered these back in like June of last year, Chris. So it took a while for them to finally come out, but we got them.
We did. And so Khan, Wrath of Khan, right? That was the first time we heard I think that was the first time you heard the phrase no win scenario. And then we kind of got introduced to that, the Kobayashi Maru test. So I loved the title of episode 4 here on Picard, and just the idea that, because we closed episode 3 of they were in great peril. They're falling down this gravity
Yeah, it kind of
well.
seemed hopeless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get
Yeah.
those closing shots of Riker going like, how much life support do we have? How are their shields? How are the weapons? And now you kind of we reopen in this you're coming back in that hopeless scenario, and yeah, it's you have some great moments that come to it.
Yeah.
But it
Now, real quickly,
yeah,
Chris, we should stop here. If you haven't watched episode 4 yet, which, maybe you have, maybe you haven't, but I would recommend stopping here, going and watching it and coming back, because we are going to go spoilers from here on out the rest of this episode. So just be aware, we're getting into some spoilers here as we walk through episode 4. So if you haven't, go back and watch the reviews of the first 3 episodes of Picard we did, either on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform, and catch up that way, and then jump back with us. But that being said, Chris,
yeah,
let's jump into episode 4, because there's a lot to unpack here.
yeah. That's absolutely. This is great. I mean, we had left the end of episode 3 with this really emotional moment, right, where Riker tells the admiral to get off the bridge, and essentially says, "You've killed us all. Get off the bridge." And you see him walking off, and it was just this probably the most emotional moment that Picard and Riker have ever had. I think was
Yeah.
that moment there. Um, and then when we open episode 4, what I like about the opening was it's actually a flashback. So it's a flashback from I think 5 years ago, and
Yeah.
we're in the bar, and there's Picard about to have a meal, and he's approached by some eager Academy cadets, and I always like those kinds of openings. I think they're great. And there's a little bit of humor there because Picard, he's kind of he wants to relax and have a meal, and then he's approached by a whole bunch of students wanting to ask him questions because he's a famous admiral. So
Yeah, he's a
yeah,
celebrity, really, right? Think about it,
yeah,
right? When it comes to Starfleet, he's a celebrity,
yeah,
100%.
yeah, absolutely. So I like that opening because the cadets are like they're so eager. Like, how did you get out of this situation? What did you do here? What was your most dire situation? And I think that's a great opening for this episode because you get him to be able to relay these stories to the cadets on this is what happened. This is what I did, and you have to be able to get out of these situations. You have to trust your teammates, trust your crew members, right? Which kind of that theme kind of carries forward through the rest of the episode. So I enjoyed that, and enjoyed him talking about Worf and the Herosian there, and we learned a little bit, about some background there. So cool opening scene. Um, until we get fast forward to the present, and you see they're just falling down the gravity well, and they're just in trouble. They're in trouble, and you kind of see I felt that there's a little bit of hopelessness there, right? Where Riker was kind of pinging his bridge crew to see what the situation was. So I'm sure they all kind of felt hopeless, I can imagine. Um, so so that was incredible. And this very poignant scene where Riker goes to Picard, after he's kind of talked to the bridge crew about how bad their situation is, but he has this very kind of intimate moment with Picard, I felt,
Yeah.
and see how you feel about it too. But when he came in there and he said, um, immediately Picard says, "Hey, I want to apologize." And he says, "No, stop. I'm giving you a courtesy. This is what's happening. We're not going to make it, essentially. Um, your son is here. Spend some time with your son. Get him to know him over these last few hours that we have, and get your affairs in order." And then he says to Picard, "Oh, when you were right." So I think what he was alluding to was that Riker had been devoid of feeling like for so long, and he had kind of realized that about himself. But I thought that was a good scene to have in there, especially after this huge blow up that they just had. Um, for Riker to go in there and to talk to Picard. Very nice. Very, very interesting. How'd you feel about that one?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of reminds me a little bit of the way Picard would deal with his bridge crew, right? There were moments
Mm-hmm.
where he had to put aside feelings or friendships and do either some level of discipline or he had to be very stern about something. And then after that was over, I know he did it with Data at times. Of course, Data doesn't have any emotions, at least in the TNG series, because there's no emotion chip yet, right? Well, prior to, I guess, did he have the emotion chip in the episode Brothers where he meets Dr. Soong at that time? I don't remember if that's when he gets it for the first time or not. But regardless, he has a way in which he goes about dealing with these types of situations, right? Where he kind of he's really hard at first. He puts himself in the shoes of the captain, like, I'm the captain, I have to do this thing because I'm the captain. Mm-hmm. Then once he's done that, he says, okay, stop. Now he comes back and does this, different take, right? He has a different approach, almost like a good cop, bad cop, except for it's him by himself. And he approaches things differently and is more empathetic, to a given situation or what have you. And I kind of feel like it makes sense that Riker would do that, because Riker's been under the tutelage and mentorship of Picard for so long that he would have seen that, because it happened to him at times. I think the idea of regret maybe a little bit in Riker's mind, because he kind of went out into space to find himself again, and now he's thinking he may die and never see Deanna and his daughter again. So I think there's a lot of emotions probably running through Riker's head, and I think there's just this blow up. I think the tension, I think the stress, the emotion, it all kind of comes to boil when Riker just blows his top at Picard. You're right, though. I think it's the most intense emotional scene I think we've seen between Picard and Riker in their history. So, and I think it was good. I think it was good to see that, to end that way, and then to come back and have Riker say, look, you need to go spend time with your son, because he knows he lost his son, right? He lost, was it Thaddeus or Thad?
Thaddeus, yeah.
Yeah, they lost him. And so he knows the grief that goes with that. And he wants Picard to have time with his son. So I think it was great. I really do. I think it was Riker showing many different sides to his persona.
Yeah, because in a way, Riker, not in a way, Riker has experienced this side of being a person so much more, like he's been a parent, like a husband, which is something that Picard hasn't experienced. So Riker has all this breadth of experience that he can share with Picard, and it's very, very, very different. Because in season 3 it was interesting. Picard had made a remark to Riker, said, "Hey, I think maybe now it's time for you to call me number one." Right. Yeah. So kind of acknowledging that switch.
Yep.
Riker has this great life experience that is so much more than Picard has at the moment. So that was quite amazing, quite good, and good to do. Yeah, but that does set, Picard takes that to heart, because he does act on Riker's advice. So he does go to see Beverly and go to see Jack and want to spend time, and he does spend time with Jack, and I think that sets up this wonderful scene that they have in the holodeck with the 10 forward bar, not the version of 10 forward that's on the Enterprise, but I guess the 10 forward version that's on Earth, or the Picard bar, or whatever that is.
Yeah, so. It's a bit of a play on the name, right? The 10 forward on the Enterprise, where they had so many meetings and gatherings on the Enterprise D, is the name of this bar on Earth that's a regular spot for him. So funny, because in the opening scene, the flashback, right, he's going to eat his lunch or dinner or whatever, and it's fish and chips, right? Like, here's this British guy who grew up in France eating fish and chips. I mean, it's kind of, and that had to be intentional. It seems everything that is done, that Terry does in this season is 100% intentional.
So, 100% intentional.
Yeah. Very interesting that he goes down to see Jack, talk to him, and they end up in the 10 forward lounge on the holodeck. And it's interesting, Chris, how they explain why they have the power to be able to run the holodeck in a time in which the ship is bleeding power, right?
It's good that it is good that they explained it, because I think if they didn't, like, a whole bunch of us would be asking that same question or having comments, right? But but this makes sense. So he explains that like, what in the times of peril, this is a place of sanctuary
Yeah.
for the crew to
Refuge or
come,
something. Yeah.
refuge. Yeah, when there's
Yeah.
no hope.
It
So
mu it has to be some sort of new ship design because I don't remember any episodes of any Star Trek series where the holodeck was independently powered from the rest of the ship. Like I specifically remember episodes where, we're losing power. Well, there goes the holodeck. Like you think about in Voyager, right? There was
yeah,
episodes of Voyager where they're on the holodeck with Captain Proton, and there's an episode called Twisted, one of my favorite episodes. We actually talked about that in our part
yes,
one review of Voyager, which you haven't listened to that, go back and listen to it. We will be diving back into Voyager again here in the near future. Where they're in the ship, right? And the whole ship's being twisted because of some thing they've run into, and they're on the holodeck, and the holodeck something's broken, and they don't have certain amount of power and all this stuff. And so, yeah, the I've always seen the holodeck's power systems connected to the rest of the ship. So maybe that in going forward in the future, they redesign that to where it could be something like Picard says, it's independently powered so that people could go there in a time of need to, I guess, cope with their ultimate untimely demise or something. I don't know.
yeah. Interesting explanation, but it was
Yeah. Well, and I,
it
I
could,
think that's why it was explained, because I'm sure Terry would have gotten questions from the diehard Trekkies going, wait a second, why does this thing have power? You know what I mean? Like, I guarantee you somebody would have said something.
yeah,
So,
yeah. So good, great scene, I think, between Jack and Picard, and Picard is want to serve what was it, whiskey or some sort of alcohol.
so I think Picard wanted just to give him some of the Chateau Picard wine, right? And he said,
Oh yes,
I'm not a wine guy or something like that. And so then he pulls out whiskey. He's like, yeah, that's the stuff or whatever.
yeah, that's right, that's right. Um, so that was funny, and I like what Jack says to Picard, because Jack kind of goes, "Hey, I know what you're trying to do here. Essentially trying to get to know me, or trying to make this connection with me. I know what you're trying to do. I don't need you to do it. I'm gonna be okay." And I like what Picard does. He goes, "Well, maybe I need this." So I thought that was a great, right, kind of switch. Picard got to show how vulnerable he was. And you kind of got to see that moment, and I think a little bit of maturity in Picard too, to be able to admit that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Picard's exhibiting a rawness, right? He's burying himself in this situation in front of his son,
yeah,
because that's not something that we're used to seeing Picard do. Picard is not somebody who's very openly emotional personally. He doesn't open up like that in this type of sense. I mean, he does in some respects, but he's very open about this. And so I think that's interesting that it's well, maybe I need this. Maybe it's not, this isn't about you needing this, it's about me needing to talk to you.
yeah. Picard has learned a lot about himself, I think. Right. Well, especially since the last season, and what he had with Q, and kind of Q's kind of lessons to him about being able to open up and receive love. So that's good. It's good. So we do have some,
Yeah, that
yeah, yeah. We do have the nice Picard gets to retell the story about him and Jack Crusher in the shuttlecraft, and I thought that was a pretty cool story to hear, and so some humor in there, but a lot of maybe lessons about trust in there too, and trusting your teammate, and keeping hope. And we realized later, but I do like this. We realized later that that is probably not the first time that Jack had heard the story. So, which is great. And Picard asks him, "Is that the first time you've heard the story?"
yeah.
So that was good. But I think at that moment, or close to that moment, or near after, then we have the scene. I know you really, really love this scene, but we've got the scene where Captain Shaw comes in, um,
Mm-hmm.
and that was very, very interesting right there, because Captain Shaw pretty much like interrupts their moment. Um,
Yeah, he's injured, right? He was
yeah,
injured in that explosion earlier.
yeah, yeah. That's right. He was injured. He's on pain meds. He says, um, and he interrupts the moment between Picard and Jack to essentially give a story about his first meeting with Picard. Very powerful. And I kind of felt that, yeah, it made sense that once you hear Captain Shaw's story about how he first met Picard, totally connects and makes sense. Like, yeah, he would feel that way about Picard. Totally.
It kind of reinforces why Shaw was the way he was to Picard and Riker, at least especially Picard in the very beginning when they first come on board.
Yeah.
Right, this kind of just nonchalant attitude to me. Here's a retired admiral. You'd never see that happen in real life. This captain treating a retired admiral that way, but in this case, he kind of has good reason, and it reminds me of the episode Emissary from DS9, where Cisco meets Picard for the first time, and Picard realizes Cisco doesn't like him because Cisco believes Picard is the reason why his wife was killed. He's Locutus, right? The Battle of Wolf 359. Yeah. It was a big deal. And he lost his wife in that battle. He became a single parent. His son lost his mother as well in that battle. And it had a real effect. So Cisco was not shy about, sharing his feelings, and he did not hide what he thought of Picard from him. And Picard could kind of tell that. And I kind of, that immediately flashed in my mind when Shaw has this discussion with Picard. Shaw's bitter about it. The story he tells about how him and a bunch of his other friends and stuff go down to the escape pods, and there's only a limited number of seats left, and there's they can only take 10 or something like that, I think. And this lieutenant comes down, and she's like, you, and whatever, and points to him, randomly selecting people to escape, and then having to watch his friends die in that place. The show that's already bringing in so much DS9 nostalgia, which, by the way, Terry, thank you for not only giving us so much of TNG, but also bringing in another Star Trek series that's so near and dear to my heart, of course, DS9, and all the parallels that have. I mean, you've seen it, right, Chris? The amount of parallels we've gotten between all the TNG nostalgia and references and all the DS9 references we're now getting as part of it, I think, is really fantastic. We've also gotten Voyager references. You mentioned the Herosian earlier, right? And that's a reference because we had no idea that Picard had any run-ins with the Herosian. They're a Delta Quadrant species. So how did that happen if they were all the way out in the Delta Quadrant? But fascinating parallels between Cisco's relationship with Picard, Shaw's relationship with Picard, and this whole idea of reminiscing, and then Shaw steps in and talks about his hatred. And there's a quote, and I don't think this is 100% accurate to the exact words on this one, Chris, but it's pretty close, where he says, he looks at Jack and says, where your old man was on that day, referring to Wolf 359. He says, he was in that Borg cube setting the world on fire. They have a name for you, Locutus of Borg, the only Borg so deadly they gave him a GD name.
Yeah.
That's pretty profound. You could see in Picard's face the regret and the remorse on his eyes, because it's not as though this is the first time someone's reminded him of this. Cisco did. I'm sure other people would have. What he knows what happened. Whether he can argue he had no control over it because he was assimilated, doesn't matter. He was to blame for this. So it was a wow moment for me to see that come up, to see the parallels from Emissary to this. What were your thoughts in this scene? Because I found it very interesting that, you could see some PTSD on Shaw's face, right? I mean, you talk about you literally are randomly chosen to live. And he asks, why me? He's like, I was some dipshit from Chicago, just a grease monkey. Why was I chosen over everybody else? I think it's survivor's remorse, which is interwoven through many movies and storytelling when they're dealing with significant loss and battles and so forth. You see those ideas of survivor's remorse, and I think Shaw has that big time. So what were your thoughts? How did that scene affect you?
Yeah, it really made me think of Shaw as really more human. He's more human, more rounded out. He's an individual with
Less of a tool bag.
a back. Yeah. I mean, someone that has a lot of pain. Um,
Yeah.
and and then you kind of understand a lot of his behavior and his actions. I mean, because instinctually after that moment, right, he wants to protect his crew. He wants to take care of his ship. It starts making so much sense now, like why he did what he did. Where he says, "Hey, we're a ship of exploration. We're not a warship. We got to run." Or, "Hey, I don't want to do this. I want to follow orders. I'm not going to risk the lives of my crew." So all of that makes so much more sense. And you get the sense of there's also because so much of Star Trek, right, and of course, television shows and movies in general, our viewpoint is so much where we're seeing the heroes, right? Either the heroes of Star Trek or whatever we happen to be watching, or the main characters or the heroes of the book. And there is this aftermath, right, of what happens in the wake of the hero's actions, right? So even though the
Yeah.
heroes, yeah, right, the heroes have to go, uh, they're enduring this, right? I mean, we of course we feel sympathy to what Picard had to endure when he was assimilated by the Borg while he was Locutus and all those terrible things that happened. Yes, we definitely feel sympathy, and that was awful. But there's this aftermath of all of these other individuals that were affected and their lives transformed that we don't talk about that much. We don't talk about that much, except for Cisco was the main one that we talked about. And now another one like Shaw, and I thought, okay, that's great. It adds dimension to it. It really makes Shaw like human and flushes them out. So
Yeah.
I thought, yeah, I thought we learned a lot about Shaw in this episode, and so I think it made us not only this scene, but he's got some scenes with Seven, and then scenes later on with Picard, and then Seven again. I think that make us like him more. So that scene there, I thought, yeah, was a great one. And then like you said, how Picard reacted, because Picard couldn't say anything. All he said was, let him continue, something like let him continue. Um, and really, that what could have he? I
What
don't
could he
know.
have said?
What could he have said?
Yeah, there's nothing he could have said, I don't think. And I think Picard realizes that. It's a very sore subject. Picard was responsible because of the knowledge he had as a captain, right, in his time in Starfleet. That knowledge was used against him in Starfleet to kill many innocent people, thousands of innocent people. At that, the Battle of Wolf 359 was incredibly damaging. It was historically significant for Starfleet, and the way the Borg, a single Borg cube could decimate, a fleet of Federation ships. It was significant. So I find it interesting. And Wolf 359, I mean, that's a TNG reference too. It also plays into the beginning of DS9.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's a big deal. Big deal. And I
yeah,
think it's interesting how they brought that up is Terry Matalas here and his ability to interweave the 90s Star Trek, the classic Trek as I call it, tossed through Enterprise into this new season of Picard and intertwine and mix. And you begin to see, like you said, Chris, after effects. With Star Trek, especially early, TNG and stuff, you didn't always see the after effects of people's decisions always.
yeah, yeah,
The Enterprise would go to the new planet of the week. They'd do something would happen, right? And it'd end. But you didn't always see the fallout from some of those events. And I
yeah.
think you see some of that in Picard season 3.
Now, do you remember? And I'm sorry to I want to talk about this a little bit more, but do you remember if the episode with Hugh? I can't remember if that was after the battle of Wolf 359.
Yes. Yeah, he'd already been Locutus at that point because there were scenes with Hugh where he's like, "I'm Locutus of Borg," and you will trying to
That's
get
right.
him to. Yeah, it was after that, so it would have been
Yeah,
after Wolf 359.
yeah. so I could see like a whole bunch of people in Starfleet and the different echelons of leadership or whatever, like questioning Picard like all the time. So now Picard has been Locutus. He's had this whole three battle of Wolf 359, which has happened. Tremendous loss of life. Um, and and with Hugh, I mean the opportunity to kind of send a crippling blow right to the Borg, but that doesn't happen. Now
Yeah.
we know that doesn't happen because Picard is who he is, right? But there would be so many people that don't understand that I think that would just be like, okay, you had this opportunity to cripple the Borg and you didn't do it. So I feel like yeah, there could be people out there that are just bitter, like why? So now Picard's a famous admiral. He's got um all of these accolades and people that really appreciate all he's done. But I could see this other side of like he could have he could have really crippled the Borg and saved more lives. So
And you brought up a good point, Chris. I think if you look at the episode with Hugh, I think it was called I Borg was the name of the
mhm,
episode. Um, I think some of the reason why he let Hugh go was because, of course, A, he's Picard, right?
yeah.
B, he saw individuality in Hugh, so he's looking at him as an individual sentient life form. And C, I think there's regret from Wolf 359, right? There's
Mhm.
this regret of loss of life and everything like that. And so while the Borg, as sinister as they were, and the devastation they've caused, and all the death, it's this idea of being responsible for destroying them all and using Hugh as this vessel, and of course Hugh would die too, right? And he'd be the vessel to send this virus back to kill them. I think that weighed heavily on him. I think that had an impact on him, and you then see this continue on in Picard season 3 with this idea of weighing on him, on his mind. And Shaw obviously only exacerbates that by bringing it up. And he, I think Picard did the right thing there, though. I think he said, no, let him finish, let him continue, because he realized, hey, I don't have a leg to stand on here. I have to own up to this. This is something I have to live with the rest of my life. And it brings me to this idea that, you know, uh, I know it doesn't exactly translate because Picard was a Borg and all that. So it's not like Picard was choosing to make those decisions and everything. But it brings me the idea from this scene where, we have to realize that our decisions have consequences,
Yeah.
good and bad, right? It's not just bad, but I mean, good and bad. And so the consequences of your decisions are things you have to live with, both good and bad.
Yeah.
So, your decisions matter, choices matter. You have that choice to make those decisions, but your choices matter. They matter in a good way. They can matter in a good way, or they can matter in a bad way. But it's really ultimately up to you to make that decision. So I don't know if maybe that was too deep for me.
No,
I don't know. Starting to freak myself out over here, Chris. Getting too deep. No.
no, it was all good. It was all good. And you see, Jack witnesses all this, right? So
Yeah.
so Jack, like as Picard's son, um, he kind of hears this, witnesses it, and to Jack's credit, I think this was good. Like after Picard exited the holodeck, Jack goes, essentially I guess to try and make Picard feel better and say, hey, I don't remember what he says, but it's to try and console him. And the, Picard next what he says was very interesting because he Picard had closed. I felt he totally closed off his emotions at that point because that was all he could do. And he just
Yeah, he was
said
checked out.
he was checked out, right? He said, and all he could say was, thank you for spending time with me. It really meant a lot. But he was very distant. He just went to his like command faculties in his mind to try and go back to the situation. And I mean, it turns like that's when Beverly came and to talk about her kind of discoveries of what she was observing in the nebula and these energy fluctuations that were coming on. Um, but I thought that was interesting, and I thought, yeah, that felt like what Picard would do, kind of transition to that kind of command faculty faculty of his mind. So
Yeah, he retreats from the bar, and I feel like he retreats into himself a little bit.
yeah.
Knowing the Titan faces doom, he kind of got before Shaw comes in. I think maybe he felt like he got a little bit of a moment that he was hoping for with his son,
Mm-hmm.
and then the Titan, even though the Titans facing doom, Shaw comes in. Shaw kind of spoils it for him, but at the same time, Shaw kind of just has this emotional outburst. And I think it's funny how he looks back to everybody else who's in there, and it's something to the effect of like, "Oh, sorry, something about I replaced charm with asshole with charm or something like that."
Yeah.
And I thought it was kind of a little bit of a light humorous moment to end the scene. Yeah, very interesting. And the changeling that gets on board the ship, right? It's causing havoc.
Yeah.
It's causing havoc. One changeling. We saw this in DS9, how one changeling can do so much harm. And now we're seeing this come up again, where a changeling is wreaking havoc, and it only takes one.
That's right. It only takes one. And Seven is really the one that she's uh, the one that really goes after the changeling, kind of takes it upon herself to hunt that changeling down. And
Yeah.
yeah, she tells Riker, and Riker has a good moment with Seven, and he's like, yeah, keep it quiet so that you can essentially go after the changeling and hunt the changeling down. And
Yeah, she wants to
man,
tell
yeah.
everybody. She's like, "Yeah, we got to get the word out." And he's like, "No, no, 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 no. Hang on. No, we don't. He has enough experience with intruders
Yeah,
on ships and that kind of stuff. He kind of has an idea what to do.
that was a smart move.
Yeah,
Yeah,
very smart move. Yeah, yeah. Because if you alert everybody, the changeling can then, who knows, right?
yeah. And uh, and then she goes to Shaw, and so I think that was great. So she has to go to Shaw. She's pained to have to go to Shaw, but kind of realizes that, yep, Shaw's the one that knows most about the crew and can help track that changeling down. And so we get some good moments with Shaw, and we can kind of see more helpfulness and humanity from Shaw, and some uh, kind of humor in there too. Because I think as they're interacting, Shaw says something like, "Yeah, Seven, we got off on the wrong foot, and you've got a lot of potential, and you're gonna make a great captain." And he and and he's like, "That's something I'd totally say if I was a changeling." So
Yeah, that was hilarious.
yeah,
Because he's saying all that, and I'm like, okay, wait a second. Maybe he's a changeling. This
yeah,
is she's coming, because he was in his quarters, right? When she was talking to him initially. I'm
yeah,
like, well, maybe he got replaced in his quarters as a changeling, whatever. And then he's like, which is totally something I would say if I was a changeling. That little pause there was dramatic pause. I think was pretty good.
yeah.
Very well timed and delivered by the actor.
Yeah. So I loved that they got to Seven and Shaw got to cooperate a lot in this episode. So that was good. It was good. Oh, one of the things I wanted to say about the changeling was when they change into their goo form, did you notice they're a lot more gooey? Like they're
Yeah,
not.
the technology is a little bit better to make them look like that than it was back in the 90s in
Yeah.
DS9, right?
I kind of liked I liked the DS9 shimmering kind of metallic look of the changelings, but now they look kind of like gooey flesh is what.
They
Yeah.
look like there was a word that he used that Shaw used to describe these people like dough what was it, like Play-Doh people, I don't know what was it, what the term
Yeah,
was.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So very, very anyways, wanted to bring that up because I liked the DS9 original changeling shimmering metallic better, but that was
Yeah, it was.
yeah.
Oh, here you go. I found the quote here. It says, "They're goo people, walking, talking Clay-Doh."
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Can replicate a person on sight alone, voice mannerism, speech patterns, but that's it. Most of the time, you can tell. Ask them a question that they should know to answer. The answer to simple question, wrong answer, boom, changeling. Yeah, I just had to find they're goo people, walking, talking Clay-Doh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Good,
good.
good
That was good.
advice. good
Yeah,
advice.
some good humor, a humorous take by Shaw.
Yeah. Yeah. So so I'm going to switch to Dr. Crusher because she had some significant contributions, like in them being able to escape too, because there's her that kind of realized, oh, there's some sort of transformation or birth happening in the nebula, and this energy happening, and someone comes up with the idea of being able to harness that energy. And maybe it was a combination of them all with Crusher and Jack and Picard. Um, but I liked that kind of conference that they had with Riker, trying to convince Riker, like, hey, we can harness that energy, and Riker's kind of like, are you guys out of your mind?
Yeah. You got the doctor giving engineering ideas like, yeah, you should do this.
Yeah. Like, how are you gonna do that? And so they figure it out, and it has something to do with being able to release or open up the shields on the nacelles to be able to get that energy in there. But it all takes them, including Shaw, right, to be able to do this. So you've got the contribution from Beverly, you've got the essential contribution from Shaw, and you've got Riker, and you've got Picard's essential contribution, where he's got to navigate. I think Riker's actually one that, excuse me, not Riker. Picard's actually the one that helps navigate them blindly through the asteroid belt, and kind of it's a full circle connection there because that's what he had to do with Jack Crusher. So I thought, oh, okay, that they all had these like really, really essential contributions to making them be able to escape, which tied to Picard's like point at the very beginning when he was talking to the cadets, where like, hey, you gotta trust each other. That's how you get out of these situations. So I thought that was good, and I thought I really liked. Let's see how you felt. I really liked where Shaw and Seven had to cooperate to fix, and or not fix, but rig up the nacelles and do that. So that was kind of this forced reconciliation, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really interesting because they kind of have to both, you know, uh, suck up their pride and, bite their tongue and get over the ego kind of thing and say, yeah, we got to kind of work together on this, you know? And I think but the scene's good though, right? Because I think is kind of where Seven gets kind of back into Shaw's good graces a
Mhm.
little bit. He realizes that, oh, maybe I was a little too hasty to jump to conclusions. Although, she did violate the chain of command. I think he did what he needed to do. His first officer was being very, very insubordinate.
Yeah.
She wasn't following orders. And I mean, there was some, in per Starfleet, there was some things that could definitely have gotten her court-martialed,
Yeah.
and we've seen court-martials in Star Trek before. The original series was the first one to do it, with Kirk being on trial, right, for in the court-martial on the Enterprise. But yeah, very good scene, I think. Nice little scene there between Shaw and Seven.
Yeah, it was. And I watched it 2 times, and I think I caught it on the second time. I think it was Sean Seven that kind of devised the trap for the changeling.
I
'Cause-
think so.
yeah, and so I think they devised like a good trap. They did it good. It was the changeling came in the form of LaForge, of the pilot lieutenant, the pilot LaForge. So
Yep.
they're able to get the changeling there. And
Yeah, because remember, she asked her, what was her name, and she's like, "Oh, it's Commander. What was her last name? And she didn't call her
Hansen, yeah,
Commander Hansen, and then she shot her, and she's like, she calls me, Commander Seven, I think is what it was, right, or something like that. So she knew the answer was wrong. That's how she knew it was the changeling.
and Shaw's reaction was funny. Shaw's reaction was like, he looked at her, he's like, good call.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Shaw's very relatable. I think he's in a human way, like very, very relatable, right?
Yeah,
So,
he's not you look at Star Trek captains, whether you look at leading captains of a series or captains that appear on screen for an episode or two.
Yeah.
Captains always seem a little bit larger than life, maybe sometimes a little bit unbelievable in certain respects. And so I think that's a good point, Chris. I think Shaw's relatable. I think he seems kind of like a, somebody that you could understand, you could see being a captain, somebody that has real emotion and isn't just stoic and cut off all the time. That's one of the reasons why I think Cisco was such a great captain, because here's this guy, I feel like he's relatable. He's a father. He's had a family, he falls in love again with Cassidy Yates. And obviously before he goes off to the Prophets, they're expecting a child. Very relatable. So some of the other captains just seem a little bit maybe too larger than life. Like they don't seem as relatable, for lack of a better term. But in this case, I think you're right. I think Shaw definitely has that feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All of the scenes in this, the visual effects and the ships and them, because when they're actually able to escape now the nebula, I thought those were wonderful to see. You get this action. You get them navigating the ship out of there, and those were great. And you get to see Picard kind of navigate his way, right? Hey, so those were tense moments. I thought they were great to put in there. And we had a little bit of, we didn't talk too much about Vadic yet. Whole bunch we don't know about her. Yeah.
No, we don't for sure. But the scene towards the end of the episode where they come out of the nebula and there comes a Shrike.
Yeah.
And then Riker does maybe the new Riker maneuver.
I think it's the new Riker maneuver. Yeah.
Yeah. Forget the ram scoop thing in Insurrection. This is the new Riker maneuver, guys.
Yeah. The new Riker maneuver is pretty cool.
So, go ahead.
Yeah. Totally took out the Shrike.
Yeah. This idea of taking your tractor beam and using it against the Shrike by grabbing an asteroid and chucking it at the ship. Oh gosh, that was great. That was I would have been cool if they would have said something about the new Riker maneuver or whatever, but that was epic. That was just like, latch onto that asteroid. Okay, go. Okay, let go. And then the asteroid just goes and it rams, gets thrown right into the Shrike ship. It's just, man, it was great.
Yeah, Beverly, would she say, did you just throw an asteroid at that ship? I don't remember what Riker says. Maybe he just nods or says yes. I don't know, but that was cool.
Yeah, like, yes, I did, or something. I can't. Yeah, that was hilarious. It was kind of an interesting way to say, okay, they got out of the situation, right?
Yeah.
The Shrek ship has been damaged, and now they can now get out of the situation, right, and move on to wherever the next thing that's going to happen. Which I may or may not have watched episode 5 this evening. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that this weekend when we do our review of episode 5, and that'll be coming soon. So stay tuned for that. I thought it was a cool scene. That idea of freaking chucking an asteroid in their ship. I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? Giving them a little taste of their own medicine. They chucked the Helios at the Titan, right? So yeah.
So I'm curious. I mean, this really makes me wonder, like, because this is only season 4. What is going to happen in these other episodes? I mean, already you've got
season 3. You mean?
Excuse me, episode. This is only episode 4.
Episode 4, yeah. Episode 4, yeah.
Yeah, and we already have ships being thrown at each other, asteroids thrown at ships. Yeah. What else?
Nothing's off the table in this one, Chris.
I know.
Nothing.
I know.
Bringing everything to the fight.
We're still trying to figure out or I'm still trying to think about what Vadic is. We see her
that
do that
scene at the very end. Yeah, talk about that, because that was weird.
Yeah, so what she cuts herself or something, and then you get this image of her boss. I guess it was her boss.
Is the boss a changeling? Because that's what I'm wondering.
Yeah.
Like, is this?
This is what I think. If we assume that she is a changeling, the boss says something about like, your people will be destroyed if she doesn't do what he tells her. So that makes me think maybe he's not a changeling. He says it's something along. He says the phrase "your people."
What if her people is to include these aliens on her ship? What if her people is something to do with? Okay, so think about back in DS9, right? You had the changelings.
Mhm.
They're the founders, right? You had a kind of a
Yeah.
three-tiered order. You had the founders. In between, you had the intermediary. There's, I don't know what the term is for them, but the Vorta, right? They're like the middleman, middle management. That's what I was looking for. The middle management, right? For the Dominion. And then you had the Jem'Hadar. The Jem'Hadar were the brute force, right? They were
Yeah.
the fist of the founders to go out and do their bidding. Because at the end of the day, the founders were isolationists. Like, they were extreme isolationists. They were xenophobic to no end, very xenophobic. We've seen that throughout Star Trek, where they come across alien species that are very xenophobic and don't want to be left alone.
Yeah.
So I wonder if Vadic's people are the equivalent of maybe the rogue changelings of Vorta.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're asked to do the bidding. Maybe Vorta Jem'Hadar combo. I don't know. It kind of makes me wonder, though. Like, maybe she is being forced to do this. Maybe it will, and then, because when she cuts her hand, right, and that thing comes out,
Yeah.
her whole demeanor changes. And then when it goes back into her, she comes back into this like crazy, confident, like kind of psychotic, person out to get Jack Crusher. When that thing comes out of her, she seems more timid and more like taken aback than she does with that thing in her. So I kind of wonder if that has something to do with it.
Maybe it'll be.
I don't know, but
Yeah.
there's a big question there to be answered.
Yeah, big question. Big question. And you mentioned Jack Crusher. We have no idea what he's got to do with all of this yet, right? We see
Something doesn't seem right with him. We see at the very end of the episode, right, that scene in the mirror with the thing that explodes in the back of the wall.
Yeah.
Very, very reminiscent of the scene in First Contact, the beginning opening scene where Picard's in the mirror and he looks up and all of a sudden the Borg, device shoots out of his face.
Yeah.
Very reminiscent of that. I'm not saying that Jack Crusher's a Borg or that any of this is Borg related, but it's very reminiscent that Jack I think doesn't he have a flash in his mind of some scary stuff and like a door and some very red and all this, like, I don't know.
Look like a hellish landscape.
Yeah, like something's not right. There's something to Jack Crusher that's got to be the reason why she's after him.
Yeah.
And I wonder if they're connected in some way, maybe. I don't know. We don't know yet.
Yeah, we don't know.
More to come, I guess.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how they tie that together. Because here's my thought. When I started seeing that, I'm like, okay, so is Jack been replaced by this thing that maybe is supposed to be Jack Crusher now? Maybe he's not a changeling, but he's been replaced. Is Jack Crusher a science experiment? I don't know. Maybe there's more that Beverly is hiding that she didn't tell Picard. I don't know. There's a lot of things going through my head right now as to what could be the reason why Jack is seeing these things and why Vadic's after him so heavily and why the changelings want him. Like, there's got to be a connection. Otherwise they wouldn't be doing this.
Yeah. I kind of hope that it's not something else that Beverly hasn't. I hope it's not something Beverly is like keeping from anybody, because you already have her, like, she kept this big thing from Picard with Jack in the first place. So I'm like hoping it's not something else she's keeping. Yeah. So, but we'll see, because I'll be like, they've got enough to deal with. Like, now that they realize, oh, we've got Jack. Oh yeah, yeah. So great, yeah. I think a great sequence of them escaping and getting out of that. Not really a nebula, but it was a nebula, and then the transformation of the nebula, which I thought was interesting. I see how you felt too. The transformation of the nebula into all of those space jellyfish babies.
They look kind of like jellyfish, like squid looking things.
Yeah, it did. See how you feel. It did remind me a lot about Farpoint, and they even talk about Farpoint in this episode.
Yeah.
And then when I saw it, I was like thinking, are they meaning these to be the same creatures that were in Farpoint? I don't know, but I was left with that question, like, are these the same creatures that were in far point, and is that what it's meant to be? So
Yeah, I thought it was cool that they got back to this idea of when Riker says, something about, to seek out new life or whatever, right? And it
yeah,
it, it very harkens back to the idea of this idea of TNG, right? This idea of exploration, seeking out new life and new civilizations. Um, I thought that was cool. They go in thinking they're gonna die in this nebula, right? And it turns out it's a nursery.
yeah,
It's very TNG episode. Reminds you of a TNG episode, which I thought was great.
yeah. Not everything
Um,
is what you think it is.
yeah. Speaking of that, can we talk about this? I think it was the last scene of the episode where it goes back to the flashback of Picard
Yeah,
in the bar in 10 forward eating, and they ask him, and then you all of a sudden you hear this voice from behind the crowd, and he says, you know, what about your family, or something about, don't you want to have a family, or I don't remember the exact verbiage of it, so I apologize. And then you see the crowd split, and it's a younger Jack Crusher with a hat on, because Picard doesn't know who he is, and he says, Starfleet is my family. And you could just see the demoralized look on Jack's face. So the bombshell here, that Jack was given the information of where he's at and who he was, who his father was, and he does try to reach out, and he does it kind of an anonymous way. And when he hears that answer, that has to be the trigger as to why Jack said, "Nope, I don't want nothing to do with him." My heart broke for Jack. It really did, because that's not, granted, Picard doesn't know it's his son, right? But that gives you insight and further proofs, I think, to Jack why he thinks, Picard has nothing to do with him. I don't know how you felt with that, Chris. I kind of sank in my seat a little bit as a father myself. Like, if my son asked me a question like that, even though I know he is, obviously, but like, if
yeah,
my one of my kids asked me a question similarly, or something about family, and my response being what Picard's was, like if they said, "Oh, well, Dad, do you think you work too much or whatever, right? And don't you need your family?" And I say, "Oh, my job is my family." Like, how like crushing that would be to them. I don't know. What were your thoughts? Like what was running through it? Because I put myself in the shoes of Jack, and it really broke my heart for him.
yeah.
Picard didn't know what he was doing. I get that. I don't think Picard had any intent, because he didn't know he had a son. But still, like, you're in Jack's shoes, and now. Granted, of course, Jack may not necessarily have been reaching out to him in the way he should have.
Yeah.
But oh gosh, it breaks my heart for Jack. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Chris?
Yeah. I mean, you could see a young man. Um, you could totally see a young man doing what Jack did, right? I mean, maybe a young man that has had difficulty, or not a father figure, and like asking or posing the question, or challenging uh the man, like Jack did. And so my just it leaves you feeling with this just kind of tied up gut. Feel
Yeah,
like bad. Um, with Picard's answer there, you could you see this flash across his. So the question comes to Picard, and you see this expression kind of flash across his face. Um, I thought that's what I saw in Picard. The question comes, and you see him kind of reliving. He must have been reliving his experiences with Beverly. When he says, what about, when Jack asks, what about the family? So I felt like, okay, he sees this. There's regret there. Picard's got this sorrow, and he's got the regret, because he still doesn't know, like, why Beverly just up and left. And he's
yeah,
got this unanswered, like, part in his mind, and this regret. So part of his defensive reaction, Picard's defensive reaction, is just not to acknowledge that at that time, and just say, well, well, yeah, Starfleet's been my family. So I can understand why Picard like answered it that way, because he didn't want to be, vulnerable, express that vulnerability at that moment with all of the cadets there. Um, and yeah, like, right, if you're Jack, if you're that young man and you hear that, I mean, knowing what Jack knew, because Jack has the advantage of Jack has the advantage of knowledge in that moment. So yeah, he's gonna be devastated and go, okay, well, this kind of reinforces what I thought and why I shouldn't like reach out to my father, and I'm gonna go back and do whatever I'm gonna do. So you
Yeah.
just you just feel you feel sad about the whole kind of situation. That's how I felt.
Yeah, I did too. It was a little bit of a bummer. To be honest with you, is probably my least favorite scene in this season so far.
Hmm.
I get why it was done, obviously, to explain why Jack hasn't, had any relationship with his father. But yeah, it was tough to watch. It was. I thought it was a emotional jerker for sure. Not saying crying, but you know what I mean, like just emotionally taxing. I think in that scene to sit there and I remember after the episode was over, just kind of sitting there, like really feeling really sad. Like, man, like, like you're Jack thinking maybe you're going to go see your father. You kind of know who he is. He's got this crowd around him. Obviously, he's, so important and significant in Starfleet. And to get that answer, you're like, oh, okay. So it doesn't matter if I tell you, you don't need anybody else. You just need your job, basically your work.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, well, let's just really quick. I want to pause here, because I promised Todd over at Computer Resume Podcast that we'd mention Trek Fest 38. If you've never heard of Trek Fest, well, Trek Fest 38 is coming. So get ready to boldly go where thousands have gone before. It's Trek Fest 38 on June 23rd and 24th this year in Riverside, Iowa, the future birthplace of Captain Kirk. Come and enjoy tons of free activities for you and your family. This year's event will feature some of the best bands in the area on the Riverside Casino and Golf Resort, sponsored on the main stage. For more information about this year's event, visit us on Facebook at Riverside Trek Fest, or on the web at trekfest.org. Riverside isn't just where the best begins, it's also where the trek begins. So it's an event that's been ongoing for many years in Riverside, Iowa, celebrating Star Trek. So be sure to go check that out. That being said, Chris, let's move into some kind of final thoughts of the episode to tie it all up. And maybe if there's any questions that you have that might not have been answered, anything like that, and then we'll wrap it up and get ready for episode number 5, which is currently out.
Nice. Yeah. So some of my final thoughts, like I said before, I loved that the episode was called No Win Scenario, and there's this connection back. We never say Kobayashi Maru the test there, but there's this connection back right to the Kobayashi Maru
Yeah.
and Wrath of Khan. So I love that. And uh, my my final thoughts are that I really appreciated how the episode was bookended with the flashback scenes with Picard,
Yeah.
and what he was teaching in those flashback themes were, hey, if you're in this situation of hopelessness, um, you get through those situations by relying on each other.
Mm.
Trust in trust and faith in each other. And that's what Beverly actually says in the episode too. I think there's this question of like, what do we do? What do we do? Riker says something like, "Hey, Starfleet protocol, we got to do this, this, and this." And Beverly actually says something to the effect of like, "No, we trust each other like we've always done. We rely on the trust on one another." So I like that, and you've got that. Like once they realize that trust is what they have to use to get them through that situation, and the faith in each other is what they have to use. Um, each of them has these really essential contributions. Beverly contributes, Shaw contributes, Seven contributes, Picard contributes, Riker contributes. They all have these. Without those essential contributions from each of them, they don't make it.
Yeah.
That's what I really, 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 really liked. And whether there was intentionality like in that when they were crafting this episode or not, I that's how it came across to me. That's how I received it. That's kind of the message I got. We're like, yeah, on these scenarios where it's very dire and very grim, you have trust and faith in each other, and then everyone contributes to the maximum that they can. So that was the message I took from it.
Yeah. Yeah, you get this idea of teamwork, right?
Yeah.
You get this idea of, working together for the common good, which in this case is getting out alive, right? And
Yeah.
escaping the nebula / nursery, whatever you want to call it. Overall, I thought the episode was great. I think this episode was maybe one of the best written episodes in the whole Star Trek franchise.
Mm.
It was very well written, very moving. I loved the Deep Space Nine references. I think it's fantastic because we're getting okay. I'm gonna say this,
Uh-oh.
and it's a pun intended, because we have TNG and DS9. We really are getting the best of both worlds.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, folks, I'll be here all week, and you can be sure to tip your waiter and waitress. Anyways, so yeah, we really are getting the best of both worlds, right? We're getting, obviously this is a trip down nostalgia lane for TNG. This is about the crew, but the fact that they have interwoven in the biggest story arc from DS9, which is the Dominion War, right? And these idea of these rogue changelings is so fantastic. We get a tribute to Odo, right? We see his picture on that pad, and Seven's looking for a bucket, during the episode, that where the changeling would go to, go back into its goo form, right? Because they at some point they can't hold their shape forever, right? They have to go back into their liquid state. We saw that on countless occasions in DS9, and when Odo couldn't, what would happen? He'd start flaking and look really gross, and when he wasn't allowed to or wasn't able to revert to his gelatinous state, I think they called it. Riker seems to make amends with Picard. The Shaw and the Seven episode, the Shaw and the Seven relationship being mended was kind of cool. Shaw getting to be a grease monkey again, as he called it, by kind of hot wiring the warp nacelles to collect that energy from those waves. To me, the two scenes that stand out the most from this episode is obviously the scene about Shaw kind of calling out Picard and the explosiveness of the survivor's remorse and the PTSD I think that Shaw is still dealing with today, right? Of being randomly chosen. Like, why him? What was so special about him? He was this, like you said, dipshit from Chicago, his words, not mine. And this grease monkey, why him? The ending, right? That flashback, the twist we talked about, where Jack learns, where we learn why, that Jack doesn't have anything to do with Picard. It's because of their first meeting.
Yeah.
And him realizing that he doesn't need anybody else but his family, which is Starfleet. That was really hard. That really got to me, because I felt so bad for Jack. And Picard wasn't doing it intentionally, because he didn't know that was his son, but it's still heartbreaking. Now, a couple of things I have questions about. They're still not answered. Why do the rogue changelings want Jack? What's this obsession? Is he part of them? Like, is he one of them? How is he connected to them? I don't know the answer to that. Is Vadic a changeling herself, or is she maybe a subservient like a Vorta or something to these rogue changelings? It would kind of make sense, right? That the changelings have a similar structure, because that's what they would have been used to from having been a part of the Great Link before, right? What comes out of her body and why is it living in her body? That's something else. The other two things I had: when do we see Geordi for the first time? We haven't got Geordi yet. And when does Brent Spiner show up? I'm assuming as Lore, because I think that's how it was advertised in one of the publicity photos. It had Lore next to him. So when are we getting them in the series? That's when is Geordi coming? I'm assuming Geordi's coming to save the day at some point. But how are we tying in lore if that really is what Brent Spiner's playing in this?
Yeah.
How are we tying him in? How are we tying Geordi in? I mean, we're 4 episodes in now. So we only got 6 episodes left. When do they come in? Do they come in for a snippet? Yeah, I was a little bit bummed that so far, anyways, we've only gotten Deanna Troi over the communicator, right?
Yeah.
Like after they survive, right, and Riker, they get out of the nebula, and Riker's able to talk to Deanna, and he talks about, kind of finding himself out there and realizing kind of his mistake and wanting to come back again, and rekindle things, I think, and repair something in their relationship. To me, that stood out. So yeah, a lot going on in this. A lot going on in this. A lot of emotions, a lot of things to break down, a lot of things to think through and digest as we wrap this episode number 4 up.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing episode 5. You've had a head start. Maybe.
Yeah, I may have had a head.
Yeah.
I've had a head start. Yes, I have. But so I'm looking forward to sharing our thoughts on our next review of Picard for episode 5 of season 3, coming at the time that this releases. It should be out within a couple of days of this review, and so you'll have a chance to binge our podcast, right, where you get a chance to go through it and listen to some back-to-back episodes, so to speak. But this is good, Chris. I think this season of Picard, man, it's explosive. It's nonstop. At every turn, there's something that really grabs a hold of you. I find they do a good job of intermingling humor, intermingling nostalgic relationships to past franchises or past series within the franchise, all the while creating new emotionally charged, deep scenes that really make you think, that really get to you. It's exciting. It's really exciting to be looking forward to a brand new episode of Star Trek every week. I haven't felt that in quite a while. Other than Strange New Worlds, haven't felt that in quite a while.
I do want to put a shout out and very much appreciate the aesthetic of the show.
Yeah.
The design, the bridge, the ships, all of that's the effort that's going towards making this a space centric, starships and these very beautiful looking crafts, really. And so that attention to detail and how it all looks like functional and looks like it is in place where it should be. I think a great amount of work has gone into that, and so really like that. Now I wouldn't have a bridge that like has as much gloss and as dark like that, but that's okay.
Yeah, you'd be the carpet guy, wouldn't you? I know.
Yeah.
It's okay. That's what we're used to. No, I mean, you look at what Doug said, right? Terry
Yeah.
brought in the OG folks. He brought in Denise and Michael Okuda. He brought in Dave Blass. He brought in Doug Drexler, friend of our podcast. He brought in a lot of people, and I think it's evident in that. Yeah, there's a modern flair to it. And yeah, we have a surprise guest coming up for you guys in the very near future, hopefully. Also somebody who worked on Picard, who's been mentioned by Doug, and we look forward to sharing that with you as soon as we can. And we're really excited to talk with this individual and get more insight into the behind the scenes and the creation of the aesthetics and everything else that we see on screen, because it really does. It feels more like Star Trek this season than the first 2 seasons combined of Picard or anything from Discovery. It really does feel like Trek again, and that's what's great. And I think the fans, us included, are getting, I think, what people have been screaming about for a while. And it's awesome. So, yeah. So, thank you guys all so much for listening. We really appreciate it. By the way, we do have a new country listening in, Chris.
Oh, where?
Yeah, we added a brand new country to the podcast. Portugal is now on the list. So Thank you so
Yes.
much for joining in Portugal. I have distant relatives from Portugal from back in the day, and so it's cool. Another country listens. We appreciate you all tuning in and being a part of our listening audience, or those viewing us on YouTube. We very much appreciate it. If you are on YouTube, be sure to smash that like button, hit subscribe if you haven't, and hit the bell for notifications so you can get notified the very moment our next episode comes out. We typically do a premiere of it, and if you get a chance to jump on during the premiere of the episode, it's not live, but you can certainly go on and chat with other listeners at the time as the episode premieres. It's an awesome time. Sometimes we're on there chatting with you all and sharing in the experience. If you're on a podcast platform, be sure to follow us on there. Leave a review if there's an option. Let us know how we're doing. We always appreciate that. So yeah, we'll be back very soon with another review of episode 5 of Picard. We can't wait to share that. With what I watched tonight, there'll be plenty to talk about, and I'm looking forward to it. And I know you will too, Chris. So yeah, this has been fun, and we'll be back soon with another review of Picard season 3.
Will be great. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So yep, thank everybody for watching, listening. We always appreciate it, and we'll catch you next time right here on the Random Redshirt Podcast.